Well, it's the end of 2020, and you know what that means. It's time for our yearly roundups, and detentions, and executions. 2020 has been such a weird year. Yeah, so that's right. This is my top 10 albums of 2020. Now, I haven't really done a lot of reviews this year. I kept meaning to, and just never got around to it. I really want to sort of clean up this setup a bit, maybe get myself a little backdrop or something. Something to sort of spruce up this whole me recording in my living room kind of vibe. Yeah, it's no secret 2020 has been kind of a crappy year for a lot of us, with various news items going around, and just a whole lot of uncertainty about the future. But there is one thing that has been certain. Music is still music, and it's still really good. There's still a lot of really good stuff coming out, and I thought, for this video, this last video of 2020, I wanted to go over some of my favorites that have come out this year and just talk about music. So first things first, I'm going to go over a few honorable mentions. And the thing about these honorable mentions is that they are albums which I liked enough to sort of consider them good, but not enough to really, put on my top 10. Maybe it's just one song I liked from the record, or maybe I just haven't spent enough time listening to it. But I thought I'd go over just 5 honorable mentions. There have been a fair number more albums that have come out this year that are also probably befitting of honorable mentions, but these are the 5 I decided I was going to go with just to sort of stay on brand. The first is Novena's 11th Hour, a really respectable second album from the prog supergroup outfit that features Haken vocalist Ross Jennings. The track Corazon is really awesome. Next up, we've got Impulse Voices by Australian guitarist Pliny. And I really love Pliny. I've only listened to the album twice, though, this year so far, and I loved it both times. I really need to sit with it and let it kind of grow on me a little bit more before I really consider where it's going in a top 10 list. Next, we've got King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizards KG. It's a bit of a retread of their Flying Microtonal Banana album, which, in a sense, is kind of a disappointment, but on the other hand, it's still a good King Gizzard record, just starting to sound a little bit more of the same. After that, we have Sons of Apollo MMXX, which I think the song Desolate July I really liked off that record, and then the rest of it's just kind of throwaway hard rock. Nothing terribly wrong with it, but it just isn't my style. Lastly, and this is one that almost made it onto the top 10 list itself, is Neil Morse's Sola Gratia. Gratia, however you pronounce it, I don't know Latin. It's a really good record, and I got a lot of flack from Neil Morse fans when I posted my review of the Neil Morse Band's Great Adventure for the fact that I said that it was kind of just Neil Morse doing Neil Morse. And I think a lot of people took that the wrong way, as if I was saying that as some sort of really big open criticism, when really it's just that's what you expect. I mean, I wouldn't expect Neil Morse to do anything different. And he doesn't on Sola Gratia. It's exactly what you would expect a Neil Morse solo record to sound like. Nothing more, nothing less. Alright, anyway, we are now on to the actual top 10. And I'm going to start this list off with my number 10 choice, which is Virus by Haken. It's not a terrible album by any stretch. I do feel a little, though, like Haken's sort of fallen from grace just a little compared to their past records. It's a very technical record for them compared to their last couple, which were a little bit more on the fun side. The last one, Vector, was very much more a metal record at its core than a prog record. And before that was, I believe, Affinity, which was really more of that, prog rock, 80s new wave kind of sound, which I love that. But going to Virus, It's a good record, but it is plagued by a lack of any real big, catchy hooks, which to me is kind of a big part of Haken's charm. That said, I think that there's enough really good material on this record, particularly the singles Prosthetic and Invasion, that really make this worthy of my top 10. It's a very good record. There are call-outs to past records on this as well that sort of, really sort of up that nerd factor. Like, if you're really into Haken, you're going to find some things, some surprises that you're really going to like on this record. That said, I listen to Haken a lot for those catchy hooks as well, and those are sadly kind of lacking on this record. At number 9, we have Palimpsest by Protest the Hero. Now, Rhodey Walker is a big part of the reason why this album was delayed so much, because their last release was, I believe, in 2016 with Pacific Myth, and their last full-length album was Volition back in 2014. And Rhodey Walker, well, he had himself a James LaBrie-level vocal injury that almost took him out for singing, and unlike James LaBrie, who kind of just went on and did his thing, Rhodey did the right thing and put the brakes on for a year or so to recuperate. And it is a bit unfortunate, though, that the result is that some of the vocal lines do come off a little less than stellar, especially when he's really pushing those high notes. Like the last song, Rivet, he kind of just goes for it, and it does fall flat a little. But I will say, when he does nail the vocals, he absolutely nails it. And it really gives this record more of an emotional quality that you kind of found a little lacking on some of their previous records. As well, there's a very mature sort of orchestrated symphonic element to this record that is sort of a new exploration for Protest the Hero. And you know what? I think because of that, that really puts this album a cut above some of their past material. Volition was a great record. Scurrilous might be their best. This is probably, though, more on the level of something like Blood Meat or Fortress. Blood Meat is on Fortress. This is kind of like Fortress in that very symphonic approach, but a lot more like Scurrilous in its more progressive sound as well. So it's a really good mix. Number 8, Van by Clowncore. This is such a weird year that somehow a meme made it onto my top 10 list. For those who don't know, Clowncore is a pair of anonymous musicians that combine electronic music with grindcore aesthetics. Very, of course, Halloween image with the scary clown motif. And they recorded, or at least appeared to record, this entire album inside a 1993 Toyota Previa minivan. And it's absolutely one of the wackiest rides you're going to have with music all year. Even though this is only 17 minutes long, it could, I guess, be an EP. One of the reasons why this made it to my list is that even when you remove the mimetic element from it, like the visuals and the just sort of over-the-top styling of everything, the music still holds up. I mean, these are two talented musicians, and they waste no time showing that off on this. So I gotta say, I really dug this, and you know, you might find yourself surprised, even if you're not into clowns or grindcore or electronic music. You might actually find something on this recording pleasant. Number 7, Blue Oyster Cult, The Symbol Remains. This is their first album in close to 2 decades. I think their last one came out in 2001. And normally when classic rock bands put out new music in the 21st century, it falls flat. But there have been a few really good releases in the last few years from bands like Styx, Deep Purple. They've been putting out some really good later era material. Kansas is another one that came out with a very, very good album this year. But Blue Oyster Cult managed to go this whole time. They lost two members. Albert Bouchard quit back in the 80s, and keyboardist or guitar player Alan Lanier died back in the 2000s. Yet somehow they came back with exactly the same kind of creativity and heaviness that they've always been known for. I mean, The Alchemist is practically a modern metal track. I mean, there's even some like sweet picking. You've got Tainted Blood, which shows off their new guitarist and vocalist, Richie Castellano, I think his name is, who brings a very modern edge to the band. And then you have songs like Box in My Head, which sort of recalls that poppy 70s quality to Blue Oyster Cult. And then references to the past, like the St. Cecilia recordings and all that. This is kind of a love letter to the band's fans. Very well might be their last record, but, you know, if this is what they're going to go out on, they should feel proud. Number 6, we have Human Nature by Nightwish. I'm not normally a big symphonic metal, power metal kind of guy. That's more my girlfriend's domain, but I really appreciated how Nightwish kind of went in a more conceptual direction with Human Nature, and they really sort of show off more of a progressive musicianship with this record. More odd time signatures, more weird sort of song structures, a bit more of a different balance between ballad tracks and heavier tracks. And the heavier tracks that are here are still really good, like Noise and Music. And then you have the track Harvest, which may be my chorus of the year. And it's a very different sort of side to the band, which shows them going for more of a folk rock kind of attitude. It's just such a diverse record. And then you have the second disc, which is this very cinematic sort of, I want to call it an orchestral piece, but it's maybe a little more than that. It's kind of like a film score, but it's a film score to like the birth of creation. It's such an interesting and diverse record, and this will probably go down as maybe not a fan favorite for Nightwish, but one that critics are going to really love this record. At number 5, we have Circadian by Intervals. Now, I already mentioned that I really dug Pliny's record, and I'm going to be honest here, 2020 has been kind of a bumper year for instrumental solo guitar shred, probably because you don't need a big studio to make it. I mean, I make it in this room, if that tells you anything. So, you know, lockdowns, quarantines, whatever, that's never going to stop the shred train from rolling out of the station. And Aaron Marshall did an absolutely wonderful job with Circadian. And, you know, it goes back to a little bit of a heavier sound with Aaron Marshall bringing back the 7-string for some of the tracks, but he doesn't succumb to that urge to gent like he did on the band's first 2 releases. Instead, it's just more of his very pop-influenced guitar melodies with heavier underpinnings. It's a little darker, it's a little angrier, but I really enjoy what Aaron Marshall did on this record, and Circadian is probably one of my favorite instrumental releases of the year. Number 4 is Long Day, Good Night by Fates Warning. Now, rumor has it this is the band's final release, and if that's the case, this is a hell of a way to go out. Fates Warning has always been just one of the most consistent progressive metal bands in existence. I mean, you look at a lot of other bands in the genre, and you could always point to like 1 or 2 albums of theirs that are like, maybe not as good, but with Fates Warning, it's like you have to go back to when they had their first singer, John Arch, to find something that's even less than perfect. And Long Day, Good Night just continues that streak of ridiculously solid album after ridiculously solid album. It's just one of those things where you put it on, you let it wash over you for the whole time it's on. There's not really much point in distinguishing any one track from this record because it's just this big impenetrable slab of sound, and that's kind of what you know you're in for with Fate's Warning. They're just good at doing that sort of wall of epicness, and Long Day, Good Night brings that to the table. Number 3 is Transitus by Ayreon. I actually kind of hated this album at first. Like, I was so pissed. Especially with the fact that Arian was kind of settling into using the same few singers over and over again. As much as I am admitting this album is my number 3 record of the year, if he does another friggin' album with Tommy goddamn Karavik, I'm gonna scream. That being said, this album was a slightly different direction for Ayreon. The story isn't connected to the Ayreon universe. It's more of a self-contained sort of gothic romance story that has some paranormal undertones. There isn't like the science fiction element to this record that he usually has. Some of the guest performers on this are really good. Like, you've got, of course, Dee Snider from Twisted Sister doing vocals on Get Out Now, which is, the big single from the record. Guitarist Joe Satriani shreds on that track as well. You have some guitar work from Marty Friedman. And just there's a bit of a diverse vocal lineup on this. Like, you actually have a greater degree of female vocalists on this record. Not to get into the SJW stuff, but I appreciate that he's bringing in more female vocalists, more vocalists who are people of color, like Cammie Gilbert from Oceans of Slumber, who plays the love interest role in this album, as well as the drummer from the band Threshold, who plays Cammie Gilbert's character's father. Both are black vocalists, and I really appreciate that Arian is doing that with the context of, like, his music, is we're starting to see more diversity from him. Whether that's on purpose or not, I don't know, but it is appreciated all the same. At number 2, we have Terminal Velocity by John Petrucci. This is sort of a homecoming kind of record for me because I'm a massive Dream Theater fan, and I've always loved the synergy between guitarist John Petrucci and drummer Mike Portnoy, and this is the first album that they've played together on in 10 years, and you can really tell that this album was a very emotional, triumphant meeting of the two spirits again. And I mean, even when this album tries to go into darker territories, there's still this unrelenting joy and passion you're hearing in the music, and it's so infectious that even when John Petrucci is just playing a million miles a second, you can't help but just feel something. This is a perfect example of shred being done emotionally and done right. And, even in a year when there's so many really good instrumental guitar releases, when you put, like, John Petrucci solo album out that year, there's no question which album is coming out on top in that genre. It's going to be John Petrucci, because they knocked it out of the park on that one. And they did foreshadow a release of a new Liquid Tension Experiment record next year. That's going to be fun. Alright, so finally we are at number 1. And my number 1 record, I think anyone who knows me personally well enough knows this album was destined for this spot. Panther by Pain of Salvation. This is easily one of their most experimental records, one of their most emotional records. It has a little bit of everything they've done, from the very soft, progressive stuff of their first 4 albums to the very masculine, gritty kind of sound of Scarsick and the Road Salt records, to that sort of emotional punch of their last record, In the Passing Light of Day, to even just some very theatrical and very interesting structures. It's just such a diverse record for them, and it displays that you can have this very technical music, but still have it awash in emotion, and even a bit of, I guess you would say, wokeness or awareness, where a lot of the lyrical themes have to do with neurodivergence and, the idea of what even is normal. Just having that very interesting lyrical theme that I think a lot of us who are into progressive rock can relate to. Not only is this an album that's just so weird and technical and all over the place, but it's also very relatable. It's got a very gripping emotional content to it. And I think for that reason, this album deserves to be my number one of the year. It's an album that I continue to discover new things on with each listen, and it's an album that never fails to make me feel something when I give it a spin. So that's it. That's my number one album of 2020. So there you go. That's been my top 10 of the year. I hope that 2021 goes a little bit better for music. There have been some, of course, as I mentioned, some really great releases in 2020, and I really enjoy what I have heard this year, but I'd really like to see 2021 just knock 2020 out of the ballpark, and let's see some really exciting releases. I mean, we already have rumors of new Dream Theater, Liquid Tension Experiment, so I'm already on board. Mastodon's supposed to come out with some new music next year. Bring it on. Anyway, thank you for watching. Have a happy new year. I hope you guys also had a happy Christmas. Stay safe this year. Hope to see you guys more in 2021. Thank you.